There is exactly one strike zone written in the official MLB rulebook, and roughly 100 versions of it actually being enforced on any given night. One for each umpire, each batter's stance, and each count. The rulebook zone is a tidy rectangle. The enforced zone is a folk tradition, shaped by decades of habit, and as of this season, occasionally overruled by a camera system that does not care about anyone's feelings. What follows is that zone, explained the way your eye would actually track it, bottom to top, then inside corner to outside corner. Every rule is real, every controversy is real. It will not be treated with much seriousness. It will be treated with exactly the seriousness it deserves. Number 1. The bottom of the zone. The hollow beneath the kneecap. Officially precise, practically a suggestion. The rulebook defines the bottom of the strike zone as the hollow beneath the kneecap, a phrase that sounds like it was written by a doctor moonlighting as a poet. In practice, this means the lower boundary is not a fixed height off the ground. It moves with every hitter's stance, crouch, and leg bend, which means the same 58-mile-per-hour curveball dropping through the same physical point in space can be a strike against one batter and a ball against the next, depending on how bent his knees happen to be at that exact millisecond. Umpires have historically struggled with the low strike more than any other part of the zone, and the data backs this up. For years, pitches at the bottom of the rulebook zone were called strikes at meaningfully lower rates than pitches at the top, meaning the real enforced strike zone was quietly shifted upward league-wide without a single rule change. Nobody voted on this. It just happened, one plate appearance at a time. Because it is genuinely difficult for a human eye positioned behind a catcher's skull to precisely track where a moving ball crosses an invisible horizontal line near the ground. Catchers have spent entire careers exploiting this. A pitch that lands in the dirt and is smoothly lifted into the umpire's sight line before it fully registers has a real chance of being called a strike it did not earn. This is not cheating. This is a job title. Number 2. The top of the zone. The midpoint that moves. A border nobody can see from the dugout. The upper boundary is defined as the midpoint between the top of the shoulders and the top of the uniform pants, a measurement that requires an umpire to mentally locate two separate points on a moving human body and then average them, in real time, from 60 feet away, while also tracking a baseball. This is the strike zone equivalent of asking someone to solve a geometry problem while being shot at. The top of the zone has moved dramatically over the decades for reasons that had nothing to do with hitting or pitching, and everything to do with committee meetings. In 1963, MLB expanded the zone to the top of the shoulders specifically to increase strikeouts and speed up games. Offense collapsed so badly that the league lowered the pitcher's mound 5 inches in 1969 just to undo the damage. A group of men in a room changed where a strike legally begins, and the entire sport's offensive output rearranged itself around the decision within a single season. Modern high-velocity fastballs, thrown with elite backspin, resist the expected drop of gravity long enough to arrive near the letters, looking to the human eye like they are still rising. Umpires call this pitch a strike more often than the rulebook zone technically allows, because a ball that appears to be climbing reads as more dangerous, more central, more obviously a strike, even when it isn't. The eye gets fooled. The eye has been getting fooled since 1876. Nobody has fixed the eye. Number 3. The batter's box loophole. Stance and crouch, the zone you can manufacture. Because both the top and bottom boundaries are defined relative to the batter's own body and not to any fixed point on the field, a hitter can technically manufacture a smaller strike zone simply by changing how he stands. A batter who adopts an exaggerated crouch shrinks the vertical distance between his shoulders and his knees, which shrinks the legal strike zone itself, not as a trick, but as an entirely rules-compliant act of geometry. This is why extreme crouchers throughout baseball history have drawn outsized walk totals relative to their power numbers. Rickey Henderson, one of the most prolific leadoff hitters in history, built a Hall of Fame career partially on a stance so compact that pitchers were, in effect, throwing to a strike zone the size of a mailbox slot. Umpires know this is happening. They call the zone anyway, because the rule doesn't care whether the shrinkage is strategic. A hitter willing to spend years training an unnatural crouch is, functionally, negotiating the size of the strike zone using nothing but posture. Nobody in the front office signs off on this. Nobody has to. Number 4. The heart of the zone. Middle, the one everybody agrees on. There is exactly one region of the strike zone where umpire disagreement essentially disappears: the dead center, roughly belt high, over the heart of the plate. Pitches thrown here are called strikes by every umpire at every level with almost total unanimity, which is precisely why professional hitters almost never take one. A pitch down the middle is not a pitch at all. It is a mistake with stitching on it. This is the only part of the zone that requires no interpretation, no shoulder tracking, no kneecap geometry. Pitchers spend entire careers being coached specifically to avoid this exact location, an enormous professional effort dedicated to staying away from the one part of the zone where nobody would argue with them. The irony writes itself. The single spot where the umpire is never wrong is the one place a pitcher never wants to throw the ball. Certainty in baseball is a liability. Number 5. The inside corner. The jam zone, where bats go to die. The inside corner, the edge of the plate closest to the batter's body, is where pitchers try to saw off a hitter's bat, driving the ball in toward the hands rather than the barrel. It is also one of the hardest borders to see cleanly because everything is happening directly behind a torso that is actively rotating out of the way. The stakes here are physical. A pitch that jams a hitter on the inside corner routinely shatters maple bats, sending splintered wood into the infield. Mariano Rivera built a 19-year Hall of Fame career largely by living on this exact 6 inches of real estate, cutting fastballs in toward left-handed hitters' hands so consistently that opposing organizations reportedly received literal shipments of broken bats after facing him. Calling the inside corner accurately requires an umpire to track a pitch crossing a boundary that is, from his angle, partially obscured by the hitter's own body. It is the geometric equivalent of judging whether a car crossed a lane line while standing behind the car. Number 6. The outside corner. The pitcher's best friend, the most contested real estate in baseball. If the strike zone had a disputed border region, its own Kashmir, it would be the outside corner. This is the single most argued edge in the sport. The largest share of ABS challenges, catcher framing efforts, and post-game complaints originate. It sits farthest from the umpire's central sight line, exactly where a pitch has the most room to run off the plate entirely while still looking, from certain angles, like it clipped the black. Pitchers live here deliberately. An entire generation of successful starters built careers on commanding the outside corner with precision measured in fractions of an inch, because a pitch that consistently paints this edge is nearly impossible to drive with authority, even for elite hitters. The outside corner is also where pitch framing does its heaviest lifting and where automated systems have found the largest gap between what a human umpire sees and what a camera measures. Everything else gets debated occasionally. The outside corner gets debated nightly by everyone forever. Number 7. Framing. The legal art of stealing strikes, a skill that exists because the zone is a vibe. Pitch framing is the practice of a catcher subtly adjusting his glove, wrist, and body positioning to make a borderline pitch appear to the umpire more like a strike than it actually was. It is not against the rules. It exists entirely because the zone, as actually enforced, is not a fixed physical space, but a perceptual judgment made under time pressure. And perception unlike geometry, can be influenced. Elite framers have historically been worth several extra called strikes per game purely through mechanics, receiving the ball with a quiet glove, catching low pitches with an upward wrist turn instead of letting the glove continue downward, staying still instead of visibly reacting. Advanced models have credited top framers with multiple wins of value per season, based purely on their ability to bend an umpire's perception of an edge that physically did not move. This entire profession exists because the zone was never actually a zone. It was always a negotiation between a moving ball, a moving body, and a human brain trying to make a binary decision in under half a second. Number 8. The count-based zone. The strike zone that isn't the same twice. Same plate, different rules. Perhaps the most quietly absurd fact about the strike zone is that it is not stable within a single at-bat. Umpires call a measurably larger strike zone when the count favors the pitcher, say 0-2, and a measurably smaller one when the count favors the hitter, such as 3-0. A pitch located in the exact same physical spot can be called a strike early in a count and a ball late in it, without the batter, the pitcher, or the ball doing anything differently. This isn't a conspiracy. It appears to be a subconscious form of fairness-seeking, umpires unintentionally leveling outcomes that already feel lopsided. The effect has been measured across enormous sample sizes, and it holds up. The zone breathes, expanding and contracting with the count, in a way the rulebook never authorized and no umpire would ever admit to doing on purpose. Nobody wrote this rule. Everybody plays by it anyway. Number 9. Player-specific perception. The zone treatment. A zone that knows who you are. Studies of called strikes across full seasons have found that established all-stars get a measurably different strike zone than rookies and fringe players. Not dramatically, but consistently, and always in favor of the more famous name. A borderline pitch against a veteran former MVP is slightly less likely to be called a strike than the exact same pitch against a September call-up nobody in the stadium could pick out of a lineup. This is not corruption. It appears to be earned trust bleeding into perception. An umpire who has watched a hitter's swing decisions for a decade subconsciously extends him the benefit of the doubt on a close pitch. The effect is small per pitch and enormous in aggregate, worth extra walks over a career. It is the strike zone's most human flaw, an allegedly neutral rectangle quietly adjusting its own borders based on who is standing inside it. No geometry explains this. Reputation does. Number 10. The robot in the room. The ABS challenge system. Baseball finally brings a tape measure to a gunfight. Starting with the 2026 season, MLB rolled out the automated ball strike challenge system league-wide, built on a network of tracking cameras that measures every pitch against a precisely calculated, batter-specific rectangle. Each team begins a game with 2 challenges. Only the pitcher, catcher, or batter can initiate one, and only by tapping their own cap or helmet immediately after the pitch. No dugout help allowed, which means the person challenging has less than 2 seconds to trust their own eyes against a machine that has already made up its mind. If a challenge succeeds, the team keeps it. If a team loses too, its ability to challenge disappears for the rest of the game, turning every close pitch late in a contest into a genuine risk calculation. Early season data has already shown the downstream effects rippling through the sport. Walk rates climbing, and the measured value of elite pitch framing dropping by roughly a fifth, because a catcher's glove work no longer fools anyone standing behind 12 cameras. MLB tested full automation, letting the system call every pitch directly, and both players and fans rejected it, in favor of keeping humans behind the plate with a machine on standby. Baseball spent over a century arguing about a shape it could have measured at any point. It just needed cameras cheap enough and fans patient enough to let it happen. Number 11. The gray zone that refuses to die. Even with robots that can locate a pitch's crossing point to a fraction of an inch, disagreement hasn't disappeared. It has simply relocated. The ABS system still has to draw its top and bottom boundaries from a batter's measured height and stance, meaning two different calibrations, taken seconds apart, can generate slightly different rectangles for the same hitter. There is also the matter of corner cases nobody anticipated. A batter crouching lower than his calibrated stance to protect the plate. A hitter shifting his back foot mid-swing in a way that technically changes his measured zone. The system is dramatically more consistent than the human eye. It is not infallible. What this means in practice is that the strike zone has not been solved, it has been upgraded. The argument that used to happen entirely in an umpire's head now happens partly on a jumbotron in front of 40,000 people who get to watch the disagreement unfold in real time instead of just shouting about it. You have just read about a rectangle that does not physically exist, is defined differently for every person who steps into it, and is now partially adjudicated by a camera system that both replaced and failed to fully replace the human eye it was built to correct. Trained umpires have repeatedly been measured at 92 to 94% accuracy on a task most fans assume is either trivial or hopeless. It is neither. Somewhere right now, an umpire is studying tracking data, trying to figure out why his called strike rate on the outside corner sits 4 points below league average. He will adjust his stance behind the plate by an inch, maybe 2, and hope it's enough. The zone he's chasing was never fixed in space to begin with. That is, in the end, what the strike zone actually is. The visible argument at the center of an invisible negotiation between a rulebook that never anticipated cameras and a species that insisted for over a century it could judge with the naked eye something it eventually built machines to measure. The argument started in 1876. It hasn't ended. It's just better lit now. If this made the next close pitch make a little more sense, drop a like, subscribe for more of these, and go check out the last video. It's just as ridiculous.